Hello and welcome back, everyone, to our sphere painting class. Today, we have a pretty overcast day and we are working from natural light. And sometimes we need to be strategic about these things, right? If your light is drastically different and today it's quite dull compared to what it has been, you want to be careful about what you choose to work on and what you choose not to. And so, yesterday, we talked about how, when we're looking at the sphere, our background is actually a little bit darker than the shadow side of the sphere, which we have, but we were also thinking that the shadow side of the sphere might be a little bit light. So if we wanted to darken the shadow side of the sphere, we would also have to darken the background. Now, it's tempting to do a cascade effect, right? Like, oh, it's too light here. It's too light here in the shadow. I'll darken this. And then meanwhile, we lose this edge. And then we go to darken the background and are trying to refine the edge. So it's often better to darken the background first and then adjust the sphere. Another reason to do the background and possibly a little bit the sphere shadow today is that, we talked about this before, but edges are not all created equal. And because of the fear of losing our sphere, we have made a fairly crisp edge all the way around our sphere so far. But in reality, this edge is going to soften quite a bit as it meets the background. So how do we soften it without losing the shape of our sphere? That is a skill unto itself and one that we will talk about today. But essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to darken the background. Now, remember that when we painted the background, it was dark on the upper left, and it in this rare instance, because our edge of our box is casting a shadow here, it's actually darker on this side and more light sneaks in by the time it gets to this side, which is the opposite of what you would think would happen because the light is coming from this direction. So if this wasn't casting a shadow here, then this side would be lighter. But because we have an edge, we have a shadow box, this side is actually darker, getting lighter here. So I need to ask myself, does the entire background need darkened or just this part? And I'm actually quite happy with this value over here. So I think the issue is that I just exaggerated how light it got over here. So I'm going to start around here and just darken the background a touch. We're talking maybe a half a step, maybe. Okay. So we're not doing a big adjustment, but we do have to be careful while we're doing it. Because we're working on the bigger space today, I'm going to go back to my bigger brush. Our first step is just to find the note that we want to match. So I'm going to start somewhere around here and just keep it a little bit darker, a little bit longer. It's still going to get lighter as it reaches here. It's just this part of our sphere, the background that's touching this part of the sphere needs to be darker. So I'm going to be darkening it, and then I'm going to be trying to knit it back with what I already have by the time it gets to this corner. Okay, good morning, Leola. Good morning, Lisa. Good to see you all. Welcome, everybody. If you've been following us and have been too shy to say hello in the chat, this is an opportunity, a personal invite to you, the person who has not yet said hello to us. We love having an upbeat, learning community that's supportive. And so your first step of being a part of that is saying hello in the chat. Okay, I'm going to just hop into it today. I confess I am still feeling quite unwell and might be doing a shorter class today. I'm not doing great today. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just try to match the value. All right, so that is a little darker, but I don't want it to be quite that dark. And I'm also going to be using a lot of paint, which means I may need to mix some more paint on my palette. And it definitely does look like that's going to be the case. Excuse me. Okay. So I'm mixing up just a couple darker piles of paint because yesterday we were using mostly lighter piles, so I didn't really do a good job of mixing darker piles here. All right, let's see how. Still a little bit on the dark side. Okay, we're getting closer. So it's okay. like I basically want it to match what's over all the way over here. I just want it to stay darker a little bit longer on this side over here. Um, all right, now I also have to be careful because if I go too dark, it's going to disappear on this side of our sphere here. And I probably need to get my smaller brush for over here. All right, now I can soften the edge, but if I soften the edge, I still need the sphere to be in the right place. And this is where it can get dirty for us, right? This is where we can lose a portion of our sphere and then feel very sad. So this is where our visual memory really comes in, because in order to make a soft edge, we need to be able to know where the true edge is, even though we're making it softer. Yeah, me too, Ellen. I hope I get some rest this weekend too. It's just ongoing. Like it's been going on for weeks and weeks and weeks. I can't even with this cold. And a friend of mine was sick yesterday and I was dropping off some soup for them. And I'm like, I'm just gonna leave this on the front door because I really don't want to get what you have. But I'd made like this giant pot of soup for myself. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna bring you some of this soup. Um And Neil is saying that, yeah, have some friends dealing with this too. Yeah, my friend's been sick forever too. I like part of me is like, am I just, are we giving it back and forth to each other? Or is this just this super cold that the doctors keep telling me not to worry about, just whatever's going around is taking forever this time? Yeah. But meanwhile, I plan to do nothing but sleep this weekend. I'm not getting out of my bed. I'm gonna hide under my covers. Uh, I'm determined to stop being sick. I'm so like there's like a boredom of being sick almost, or just like I don't know how to describe it. I'm just like, no, I'm done. I don't want to be sick anymore. Whatever you call it, stubbornness, whatever that is. So I am going to lose my edge a little bit, but there's still the slightest value change happening here. So if I really put my nose in this, I can still see it. And also, we had determined on the sphere itself that the shadow might have been a little dark. So if I really want to keep this differentiation, I could lighten the shadow side of my sphere just a touch here. Oh, that's more than a touch. All right, this is just a little bit, right? So these are the tricks that we play as artists, as painters, when we need to make adjustments, right? And we want to soften the edge. And this edge is going to start getting lost. You have to not panic, and you have to develop your visual memory of where it actually is. All right, and so do you see how it's just kind of disappearing? And that's fine. It can disappear. We were going to darken this side of the sphere anyways. I'm not going to do all of it right now. It is a little bit, so it's still just a little too dark here. All right, that was too light. All right, now it may look like I'm jumping around, but what I'm really dealing with is the edge of the sphere. So we just have to maintain this edge. We don't want to lose the edge of the sphere, and yet I also want to soften the edge so it's not quite so sharp. But you still have to maintain in your brain, like, what are you doing? What's your purpose right now? Are you on track, off track? Did you get derailed? But I'm still on track because I'm just trying to soften this edge a touch. There comes a point kind of in our final pass where all these rules and structures go out the window and you're just picking away at things as you find them, but we're not quite there yet. We're still on our discipline schedule. Okay. But do you see how already we still have the value change, but the background is now darker than the dark side of the sphere, at least in this area, which is what we needed to be accurate. Remember that every time that there's a correction to be made, identifying that there's a problem is only a small part of the battle. Finding the correct way to solve the problem is a completely different part of the battle. Because the problem was that the core shadow looked too dark. Well, was it because we really needed to darken this? Maybe. But if we darken this, then the background wasn't going to be darker than that. So maybe the real problem was the background and then lightening this a little bit. And sometimes it's a little bit of a couple things. So again, I'm trying to be mindful of maintaining my sphere, but with a softer edge, which means I need to paint from both sides. Okay. This is the hardest part for students. It's going to take you a few attempts of keeping a sphere and getting a soft edge. Like most students at this point, their sphere is going to get a little nebulous. It's going to push out, push in a couple of places. So, if you're seeing this and hopefully it looks easy to you, but know that it's a challenge to keep values that are really close together and create a soft edge and maintain that where that edge is actually happening is in the right place, that it reads in the right place. Because when you have a soft edge, right, it takes some distance. It's basically a gradient from one color to the other, but it has to feel like it's changing color along the circular path in exactly the right way. So a soft edge is a challenge, but a soft edge exactly reading exactly where it has to be. And on a sphere, it has to read exactly right, or it's going to look like someone smushed your sphere. So it's its own challenge. Like you could even, if things are going really well on your painting, just get a scrap piece of canvas, draw a circle on it, and just practice meeting the edge from, like if this was an empty circle, like just practice a little bit of shadow value, a little bit of background value, just practice merging it around the curve before you do your true painting, because it is a really challenging thing to do, to maintain that edge visually where it's supposed to be while also giving it a soft feel. Okay. Excuse me. All right. So my brush doesn't have a ton of paint on it, and it's creating what's called a scumble. So a scumble is when you're using paint, but it's not completely covering the note. It's kind of leaving a dusting of paint behind. I try to teach my students direct painting only. I mean, scumbling can be useful in some occasions, but it's also kind of a cheat code for I don't know what color I actually need there, right? If what you need is a dark scumble on top of a light background, at this stage in your painting career, I want you to be able to mix whatever the note is that you actually need and be able to put one clean note down. Do you see the difference between this and the scumbling that I had done before? All right, it is a little lighter here. That's too light. That's too dark. Somewhere in between, please, Mandy. Okay, so I'm basically matching the color underneath. I don't mind what the color is doing down here. And if I don't want to have to repaint this edge, as long as I transition back into whatever that color is, then I don't have to repaint that edge, right? Which is what I want. So I'm just basically creating the gradient between the new dark that I put down and that edge so that I can knit the new stuff with the old stuff. Now, I still have to deal with this part of my sphere edge. And it's possible that that part of my sphere edge is going to melt away altogether. I can make this completely disappear if I really wanted to. But before I do that, I'm going to pull in the one edge just so I know where it is in case I change my mind. But then I just might let this edge completely dissolve into my shadow. So, we've been so precious with this edge. We're like, no, we have to maintain it this whole way through. But this edge is going to be really soft here because it's really close in value, and we're darkening the inside of the sphere a touch. So I'm still leaving that edge intact. I'm going to darken the inside of the sphere just a touch. Not a big change, right? This is like a half a value step. And I'm literally just going to let this entire edge disappear at this point. I don't think we need it. Okay, and that can be really, really scary to do, right? But we don't have to define shadows. The shadows are the least important part for telling our story. Our story is being told in the light. Okay, so I managed to do both things. I adjusted the background and I darkened our shadow side of the sphere slightly. I'm just working on this gradient a little bit more. I want it to be nice and even. It looks like, I don't know if this is like a little darker bit here, but I want to lighten it a little bit. This was part of our passage. If you're not sure what passage is, go back and check our early videos on the background, the first painting on the background. We talked about passage. Because basically what's happening is we're getting a little bit of definition back right here, even though we're going to passage it and just basically make it disappear. Because we don't want a corner sticking into our sphere here. It distracts us and it makes it more important than the light part of the sphere. The show is the light part of the sphere. We want that to be nice and delightful. All right, I'm feeling overall much better than this. It looks like this background is dipping here for some reason, so I'm going to adjust that. Or at least attempt to. Is that the right color? That's a little light. That's a little dark. And so I still want this edge soft. It looked like it was dipping. It's such a difficult thing to teach students that an edge can be soft and still have a direction, right? It still needs to read horizontal even though we're softening it. It's a little light. Okay. All right. So, just continuing to adjust. Now it looks like it has a little bump up here. We don't want that. You can spend a lot of time on two planes meeting. I mean, we spend a lot of time when we painted it the first time, and it can be frustrating and scary for students to go back into it. But you did it the first time. This is something to keep in mind. Anything that you did once, you can find again. So if you ever lose your drawing, if you ever lose your edge, you can refine it. You just have to stay calm and not panic. No panicking. Okay, so I have a soft edge, I have two planes meeting. I still think this core shadow's a little dark and it's tempting to go woo, 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 woo in here. But anytime that we're dealing with the core shadow, we need to tile across it, right? So if it's a little bit dark, we need to be thinking this way, not up and down, because it's actually a different color all the way through. So I'm going to work on adjusting that. I'm going to try to start by matching what's there. That's a little light, but actually the color that I needed. Remember that the core shadow is a soft edge on both sides, right? It's going to dissolve both towards the right and to the left, especially at the top of this sphere where um, the core shadow is a little softer. These aren't big adjustments. I mean, we're adjusting in half steps, a third of steps, right? These aren't giant adjustments. But I do want to make sure this core shadow is both defined, but is also curving around here. It got a little skinny right here. I want to give it just a little bit more beefiness. I want to make the darkest spot of the core shadow in the right place. And this is really an art of subtlety. This takes a little practice. It takes the ability for your eye to see really small increments of change. You've been working on that through tiling this whole time, but there's a reason why in the atelier you might be doing a few spheres, right? And part of it is that every time you mix up your grisaille string, you're training your eye to see grisaille just a little bit better. So Magritte has a clarifying question about, I missed the beginning of softening the edge. Are we softening only the shadow side? So we're softening both sides. It's just that on the second pass, I had already softened it on the light side up here. Down here, do you see how it's a little harsh going into the light side? So I'll soften it on that side and this side as I work my way down the sphere. But just remember that I'm thinking like this, right? It's so tempting to start restating the shadow like this, and you're going to lose all your beautiful subtlety if you do that. So just try to be disciplined as you work here. And remember that I have room to darken the shadow side of my sphere a little bit as well as I go. Okay, and this core shadow is kind of wide and then it gets a little bit skinnier. Right, these are just really, really subtle things. I think I can pull the darkness just a little bit more over. And again, try not to get trapped into up and down thinking. Think across. This brush is a little bit small for working on this side of the sphere, but I need it small to work on the other side of the sphere. I should probably be switching between the two. It helps to stand back. You'll see me out of frame while I'm doing this because I'm standing back a fair amount. Sometimes it's easier to see subtlety when you're far away than if your nose is right up in it. Oh, that was a little too dark, but let's let it sit here and then we'll make some adjustments. No, we darken this side of the sphere a little bit. I think we can go one notch closer. And again, this is a really subtle thing that we're doing. Continuing darkening just a little bit. Uh-oh. I overstepped my edge there. And the question is it disappearing enough that I can get away with it, or do I need to go back in and clarify? Actually, I think it's probably okay. Does it feel? All right, that feels okay. I'm definitely going to get my bigger brush. This is too big of a value change down here. Um, okay. Oh, so there's some, I've got distracted painting and I wasn't paying attention to the chat. So, there's some notes about, oh, I love seeing the transformation, right? When you get your shadows in order, it makes the light feel so much brighter, right? And people think, oh, I want my light to feel brighter. I must do something in the lights. And that is sometimes true, sure. But often it's a relationship issue, especially with unifying your shadow. Um, so I'm going to um, soften this edge down here a touch too, because we don't need such definition down here. Especially because, down on this part of the sphere, the bouncing light is mostly coming from the shadow. So it is going to deepen a little bit here, the value. And we don't need to be showing the shadow so precisely down here. It might be a little shift, fine, but it doesn't have to be this big deal. We can lose much more about our edge than we think we can. And the edge can still be visible because there's still the slightest value change that you can still find if you really need it. I'm just blending it into the shadow here. I'm trying not to scumble. I'm trying to maintain my direct painting technique. It's not that you can never scumble, it's that scumbling allows you to approximate a color without thinking about it. And for students especially, I want you to be thinking about every color that you put down all the time, because that's what's going to train your eye to see better, right? We've talked a lot about training our eye to see better in our online painting boot camp. That's what I teach all day, every day, right? Like, people think that I'm teaching them how to paint. No, I'm teaching them how to use their eye better and how to see better. That's what atelier training is. And that's what's so advantageous about training with somebody and getting feedback from somebody that has a better trained eye, is that it's really the best way to improve your own eyesight. If you're interested in the boot camp, please go to School of Atelier Arts and go to our online art classes, and you can learn more about it there. All right. Okay. I think that's feeling better. Um, and yes, Ellen, it's hard. It's so tempting to think up and down, but we really don't want to do that. Now, I've really eliminated the reflected light here. I feel like I can have just a touch of it back, not too much, but just a tiny bit of it, just a hint of it in there because we do have a white sphere. Um, we do have a white sphere, so we don't want it to get too inky. We don't want it to feel like a black hole. Whew. Okay. A little bit of a shorter class today, but that's where I'm calling it. We made the two adjustments we said we were going to make, which honestly, I'm impressed we got that far today. So that all seems good. Basically, starting next week, we're just going to be cleaning it up. So, we have our relationships in the right place, right? We finally have the background and the right relationship to the shadow and the right relationship to the light here. And really, we're just going to do a pass that eliminates, any of these little dark bits. Like there's a tiny little bit of a dark bit here, that's disrupting the form. There's a tiny little dark bit up here that's, interrupting the form. We can build up our highlights even more to just really give it a nice shine. Um, so, it's going to be tedious, the finishing pass can be a little bit tedious, but I want you to see, how we approach that. We might adjust this front plane. Actually, I'm wondering if I should do that today. Um, now that we've darkened this, the question is, at least today, it's receiving a little bit more light. I think eventually we're going to have to put a little bit of texture in here. It's not so even and flat. There's a little bit of undulation in the light here because this is a cloth. The way we've painted it makes it feel like the front of a table edge. If we want it to look like cloth, we need to do a little bit of adjusting there, but that can be a next week problem. Okay, so a little bit of a shorter class today, but we got done what we needed to get done. And I hope you all have a really wonderful, happy Friday. Oh, I have the free gift. For anybody who may have missed it, I have a free lesson plan that you can download. So you can scan this with your phone or type in the URL underneath there, and you will get a free portrait lesson plan about keying values, which is exactly what today's lesson was about, right? We had to rekey the shadow side of the sphere to the back of the back plane to the ground plane. We had to rekey those three things together. And so if you're not sure how or why I knew we needed to make those adjustments, this lesson plan will teach you everything you need to know about keying. So it's a really simple, straightforward lesson that will change your eye forever. Sometimes I feel a little hyperbolic, but I really believe it to be true, right? Like all it takes is one person with a better eye than you saying one thing at one moment in time to change your eye forever, right? Like that's what atelier training is. So even, I hope that you guys are getting better eye training going through this process with me. For those of you who really want to go the next level, I hope to see you in our painting boot camp. And thank you, everybody, for being here today. It's so lovely having you all to paint with. And we will see you starting on Monday. Happy weekend.